she, has affection for him. She wants to see him do well. And this is another way for her to support him and to know that this is more, if it wasn't serious, it's even more serious now. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Bando's Breakdowns, episode 51. My name is Zain Bando. Thanks again for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it on this Friday afternoon. Getting into the swing of things today. We have a fun show. Not as packed as episode 50, but should give you guys some decent content to work with today. And as we move closer and closer into the month of July, the first day of summer has already passed. So hopefully you guys are enjoying your summer so far. Hopefully you guys are bearing with the heat based on the parts of the country that you're in. But nevertheless, hope you guys are doing well. And I'm excited to get into it today as we get closer and closer, to August and football season and stuff like that. So should be a fun show to kind of get things rolling here as we move into a new month here soon. But until then, though, let's get to the show. So before we get to the show, be sure to listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts. That's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, and so much more. A lot of fun stuff coming out over on the audio-only side as well. You get the full show and just me and me only and whatnot. So regardless of your method of choice, you can do so there. You can also watch the show, youtube.com/ETB Network, very important. And that's, I guess, our vehicle in order to get subs. So if you could subscribe there, that would be greatly appreciated. Again, youtube.com/ETB Network. The climb to 1,000 continues. Let's get into it now for the show itself. And again, of course, you can follow my socials across the bottom at Bando's Breakdown and, of course, at ZamBando99. So let's move into the show now. And we're not going to waste any more time with this. Zan's overview, what we're going to be talking about today. The Thunder winning the NBA championship in 7 games over the Indiana Pacers. What I think it means, how cool I think it is that it's OKC's first ever title in franchise history. The Tyrese Halliburton injury, which has blown up across the internet over the last several days. And, just what it means for the Pacers. We'll talk about Bret Bielema. He's been on a couple of different podcasts since the Pardon My Take episode. He's been on C-Ball, Get Ball. He's been on Triple Option. He's been on a couple of them, and he dropped an interesting nugget that I couldn't believe that he actually said regarding one of his now former players in running back Josh McCray. So we'll talk about what he said, what he meant by it, and what I think it means for the future of college football, if anything. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Livvy Dunne at Fanatics, what she did and the card that she bought. It's pretty crazy how much money she spent on it. We'll talk about the Canelo Crawford press conference, the one specifically at Fanatics Fest. We will also talk about UFC 317. We will recap UFC Baku. I'll give my final thoughts on the Jon Jones retirement saga. I did a whole video on it when the news broke last Saturday. So if you missed it, go check out socials for that and a few other topics as well. So not to waste too much more time, though, let's get into the show. The Thunder win the NBA Finals in Game 7 over the Indiana Pacers. It's finally over, the NBA season, that is. And yeah, it was a fun series, man. I mean, it sucks that Tyrese Halliburton got injured, but it's one of those series that I'll never forget just because of how tight it was. These were 2 teams that weren't very well respected by the national media, in my humble opinion. And I think this was a great message to send that the NBA is a diverse league. You never know who's going to win on a yearly basis. The Thunder were the latest new team to join the party. And I think Indiana has a lot of potential. It just sucks that their star player got hurt at a critical time in the game. But I do think the Thunder were the better team. Of course, they covered that number at the end of the day, and they looked really good doing it. I think they're a solid team. Can they repeat? I don't know. But it just goes to show how competitive the league is. You never know. There was no Celtics. There were no Knicks, there was no Lakers. It was two teams that no one really expected to do much. I mean, OKC did have the number one seed. I don't know if people expected them to play as well as they did down the stretch, especially having to beat Denver in the way that they did. But in any event, though, the Thunder win the NBA championship. That puts a bow on the season. I was super happy to see them win it. They've been a franchise that's been chomping at the bit to win it for a while. They have a lot of nice young pieces there. I think they have a good head coach as well. And I also think that they beat an Indiana team that, was just scratching the surface of how good they could really be. So I think there's not a ton to read in the Thunder winning the NBA championship, but I do think the Tyrese Halliburton injury is dire. And obviously, according to Sharania and other sources, he could miss the entire season next year, which could really put a wrench in the Eastern Conference as to how it could shape out just holistically and where Indiana fits into that whole puzzle if they even make the playoffs next year. So that's something to bear in mind as well. And I also think that the Thunder team too, where I think they're going to have a bunch of pieces back, which is great, but it's going to be how are they going to deal with the championship hangover? That remains to be seen, but I do think the better team won this series. Congratulations to the Thunder and their fans. Congratulations to, of course, Oklahoma and that whole community. They deserve it. And shout out to that guy that does those paintings of the OKC logo in his yard. I'm sure he had a field day, and I'm sure if he isn't already, he's already creating a new NBA Champions logo and spray paint and whatnot. So congrats to everyone involved. And that puts a bow on the NBA season. And we will be discussing basketball as it gets closer to October and whatnot. But for now, let's move over to some football. So Bret Bielema continues to pull no punches, goes on the Triple Option podcast with Urban Meyer and drops a bombshell about Josh McCray and how the whole transfer portal process played out. In case you guys don't know who Josh McCray is, he was the Citrus Bowl MVP this past year, was a key staple in Illinois' running back room, someone they were going to rely on going into this fall in a big way, and decides to leave in the midst of spring ball to go to the SEC Power and Kirby Smart. So let's take a look at what Bielema said, because I don't believe that I don't believe in the sense that I don't believe in the sense that McCray meant to go out this way, but Bielema is accusing Georgia of tampering. So, of course, as this article begins from On3, tampering accusations in the transfer portal era are nothing new. Add Bret Bielema to the list of coaches bemoaning how quickly you can lose a player these days. Illinois lost one of its best players when lead running back Josh McCray entered the portal and headed to Georgia. All right, so that was obviously known. And he said it without saying his name. He goes, "We did lose a guy to Georgia," Bielema said. Somehow he found a way to the portal, and 12 hours later after being in the portal, he was on a flight to Georgia. I don't know how it happened, but it's crazy. Wish Josh all the best. He took advantage of the opportunity. Let's see. This obviously, I mentioned this in a piece on Sporting News a bit ago about the Dirk Cutter situation at Boise State. It's definitely interesting. Let's see. Let's take a look at what Bielema thinks of this year's running back room. I'm very excited. We had 3 guys last year that are coming back to us that are very special. Obviously, one of them being Aiden Lafferty, which should be interesting. We also have Khalil Valentine in that mix as well. It should be a solid running back room with a lot of with some decent experience, not as much experience as McCray, though. Continuing with this quote, and it's kind of like what I had when I was at Wisco. I had a roster one year. John Clay was a 5th rounder to Pittsburgh. Let's see, Monty Ball, James White, and of course Melvin Gordon. Those 4 guys were on one roster. All 4 of them were just a little bit different, and that's kind of what I've got going on now. So Bielema obviously took the high road in this and obviously was very, very gracious of Josh's decision. But I just think it's kind of a bad look on the transfer portal era that we're currently living in. I think, a lot more of it is being predicated now towards how much money you can get out of a kid than what the kid actually brings to the program. I mean, Bielema, and I'm not just I'm not just shooting it out of nowhere. He said it in a availability shortly thereafter that McCray basically insinuated that he was going to be a backup with the current system that Bielema had going, which to me and a few and many other people just didn't make a whole lot of sense, including Bielema himself. So I don't know. I don't know how McCray is going to work out at Georgia. I hope it works out for him. He's near the area. He's from Alabama, so he's close to home enough. But this was a huge loss for Illinois, and they're going to have to deal with it. So they bring back a lot of talent. Of course, 18 of 22 starters. They went 10-3 this past season, beating South Carolina in the bowl game, as was aforementioned. And they have a nice schedule this year. Really, the only games they got to worry about, to me, are Ohio State, USC, and Indiana. Those are the three to circle. Otherwise, this is a 9 to 10 win team again. Possibility of an outside chance of a college football playoff. I don't think it's out of the realm to say, but Illinois does have to start out well. They probably have to start out 4-0 because a loss to Duke would really damper their chances, considering it's one of the few non-conference opponents that will actually be in the running for a conference title in their respective league, meaning Duke in the ACC. So I think it's a very interesting development. Bielema's comments were not as crazy as I suspected they would be. He was very humble in that regard, but still a huge loss in the offseason. That was a huge surprise to everybody involved. And I remember the day that it happened. I think it was in mid-April, maybe early May. Can't quite remember. But I remember on the day that it happened, how shocked everybody was that he was making this move because nobody expected it. All right, let's move on to some pop culture now. Livvy Dunne, obviously in a very, very serious relationship with Paul Skeens of the Pittsburgh Pirates, decided to flex her muscles, if you will. And I mean this in a metaphorical way, of course, by purchasing a very expensive Paul Skeens card that she negotiated for $2,800 instead of her own card. I think this is very interesting. I think this is getting a lot of attention because of how much the card was actually worth. But at the same time, though, given who she is and given that given the brand she has built, I'm not surprised. And she should be able to do what she wants to do. I really believe that. I mean, no one is stopping her from doing so. And, I think this is just another one of those things that the media likes to overblow. That's no big deal. It's clear that she, has affection for him. She wants to see him do well. And this is another way for her to support him and to know that this is more, if it wasn't serious, it's even more serious now. So I can't blame her for doing it. Was it a considerable amount of money? Sure. But if this is something that she feels strongly about, she feels proud to do, she should be able to do it, and no one should be able to question her about it. I've seen too many hate comments about it. I don't know, man. You clearly don't know, what it's been like for them. So how can you say, how can you judge something that you really don't know anything about? So I would just wanted to make that clear that, I do think this was, an interesting thing to come out of Fanatics, but at the same time, this is just her supporting someone that she really cares about. So that's how I feel about it. And I know it's a strong, in defense take of her. But at the same time, I feel comfortable saying it because, I'm not one to judge what these people do. And it's someone who, is personal friends with select ex-student athletes, let's put it that way. One of them is turned professional. They're going through a lot of different things that they have to deal with themselves. So if they feel like they want to splurge and explore in their life and do what it is they want to do, they should be able to do that. So that's my rant on that. And we're going to move on to some boxing now. So It's in the midst of the Canelo Terrence Crawford pre-fight media buildup ahead of their fight at Allegiant Stadium on September 13th. And this past Sunday at Fanatics Fest, the Canelo Terrence Crawford presser got feisty. Canelo shoved Terrence Crawford in the middle of a wild face-off that had Dana White in the middle of it. And I just wanted to quickly react to this and just say that boxing needs to learn, they need to take a few notes from the UFC. Number one, there were too many people on stage for that. It just needed to be the fighters and Dana, not promoters that didn't need to be there, not other stakeholders. There were too many random people that to me just didn't need to be on stage for that. And it wasn't coordinated well, and Dana's talked about it a lot in the past that he doesn't like these boxing press conferences because people that go to these are people nobody cares to hear from. They care to hear from the fighters and maybe the promoter. If the promoter is, noteworthy enough to speak, which obviously Dana is. He's helping out and is a helping hand in this promotion of this fight. So that being said, it should have just been the essential people on stage. I can guarantee you that if that was the case, this could have all been resolved much quicker than what it was, instead of causing a near fight, and it would have been a disaster for the Nevada State Athletic Commission to handle. I think they got it under control as quickly as they possibly could based on what was shown on the stream. But outside of that, though, it was a decent press conference. Excited for the one that's actually airing within the hour, I'm pretty sure, or it could currently be going on as we're recording this. The Canelo Crawford presser at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas this Friday, which is the final presser of the three-city tour. The first one was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. This one that we just went over was at Fanatics Fest at the Javits Center in New York City. And, of course, Vegas is the final stop there. So September 13th, live on Netflix. If you have Netflix, you can get the fight. Canelo Crawford. Don't miss it, September 13th. On a big day in combat sports, which will be followed by Noche UFC 3 from San Antonio, which actually just had a main event announced. It's a pretty good one. It's Diego Lopez versus John Silva in a 5-rounder in a huge fight where the winner remains in title contention for Alexander Volkanovski, which obviously is another discussion for another day, given the outlier in this situation is Movsar Evloev, but I digress in that. But for now, though, we are going to take a quick time out and get a message from our friends over at Playback. And once we do that, we'll be right back and we'll be able to wrap up the remainder of the show with a few more topics. But until then, hang tight, listen to more, and I will see you guys shortly. Just wanted to give a quick time out in the middle of the show to remind you guys that Bando's Breakdowns is presented by Playback. I teased it a little bit earlier that there was an announcement coming, and sure enough, without further ado, here we go. Presented by Playback, watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETV Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And with that, we can get back to the show. All right, so that was a message from our friends over at Playback. And again, Bando's Breakdowns and every single show across the Empty the Bench podcast network is presented by Playback. So thanks to them for all they do in making our live viewing experience for select sports the best it can possibly be. Let's move on with a final reveal, I guess, or conclusion, if you will, to the Jon Jones retirement saga. And I'm just going to leave this right here. I will retire Jon Jones without even fighting him. That was a quote from Tom Aspinall on an old Believe You Me podcast with Michael Bisping and Anthony Smith, I think a year or so ago. And I think it's aged well. Jon Jones retired without fighting Tom Aspinall for various reasons. There's obviously some legal implications going on right now a wild hit and run case. It looks like Jones is insinuating that it was him who was involved in it. It's a very, very bad look on him. It's a huge stain on his legacy. Not just that he didn't fight Tom Aspinall, but yet another legal proceeding, which was very disturbing. I'm really not going to get into the details. Otherwise, we would be here for the next 30 minutes. And you guys don't want to hear me ramble on about that. If you guys want that, I'll get into the legal drama in a different episode. But for now, given what else we have left on the docket for today, I'm gonna save that and just more so say two huge stains on his legacy here, and not a good look. And the heavyweight division moves on with Tom Aspinall as its undisputed rightful belt holder. So we'll be getting some more info on Tom Aspinall's next fight, hopefully within the coming days and or weeks or so. So with that said, let's move on. UFC Baku. Khalil Roundtree Jr. beats Jamal Hill across 5 rounds. Easy win for the Warhorse here. Gets back in title contention after a loss to then champion Alex Pereira. That's now 3 losses in a row for Roundtree Jr. And he hasn't looked great in really any of them. Or no, excuse me, Jamal Hill. That's a win for Roundtree and 3 straight losses for Jamal Hill. But in any event, Hill hasn't looked great. That's now losses to Pereira, Prohaska, and now Roundtree Jr. Khalil Roundtree used his leg kicks, used his boxing really well, just frustrated Hill on the outside, kept him guessing the whole fight. A very, very clean performance by Roundtree. Again, keeps him in the mix in a division that, I think is at a standstill until Ankalaev and Pereira finally settled their differences, hopefully later this year in October, November, or December. That remains to be seen, but it should be a good rest of the year for the light heavyweight division. I finished 7-5 on this card. It was a rough card, only 2 finishes, but Nassim Sadikov versus Nicholas Moda is an early candidate for fight of the year. If you guys haven't seen it, go back and watch it. So that'll be fun to review as the year goes on as well. UFC 317. We'll keep this brief. We really went over the card on the newest edition of the MMA Outsiders. That was episode 119 with myself and Anthony Ballister. Still sticking with the same picks in the main and co-main event. I like Ilia Topuria to beat Charles Oliveira, and I love Pantoja to beat Kai Kara France. Let's quickly go over the particulars of the fight while we are here. The fights begin at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN Plus. And there's 12 fights on the card from the T-Mobile Arena, capping off UFC International Fight Week in Las Vegas. So Ilia Topuria 16-0 has a chance to add to his legacy with another win over a legend. His last 2 fights have been nothing short of unbelievable, knocking out Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway to add former lightweight champion Charles Oliveira to the list. That's nothing to sweat at. Oliveira 35-10, looking to become a 2-time champion in that weight class, et cetera, et cetera. Should be a great fight. That's the main event. Co-main event, Pantoja 29-5 versus Kai Kara France 25-11. Let's take a look at the particulars, though, of the main event while we're at it, as I like to look here. So tail of the tape, of course, with Topuria undefeated. Granted, he's won his last 5. A huge favorite in this fight, minus 420. A lot of people have been saying Oliveira has been overlooked here. He is 3-2 over his last 5 fights. He's 35. Topuria just entering his prime at 28. Maybe he's just a little bit outside of it. He's at 145. Of course, 5'7" to 5'10", and some great camps here. We've got True to Box, and of course, we've got Clement Club and MMA Masters on the side for Topuria. So I like Topuria to get this done. Okay, so jumping onto that, and a quick reminder too that as well, Saturday night, the Jake Paul Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight will be competing with UFC 317. Don't have a banner for it because there's not really much to discuss there, but that's another fight to keep your eye on if you're interested from a boxing standpoint. One thing that I saw, possible NCAA tournament expansion. I don't want to see it happen. We got to keep it at 68 for the people. It makes sense, as John Rothstein likes to say, do not expand the NCAA tournament under any circumstances. It would be hard to disagree there, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. But for now, though, we're going to move on to the end of the show. So Zain Zinger, not going to go too deep into this. I'm just going to say it straight. I think Ariel Helwani is wrong on his take about Jon Jones not being the greatest of all time. I can understand why you have George St. Pierre as the GOAT. I get it, but to keep Jones out of the discussion of the GOAT after literally going undefeated minus a dumb rule, I think your argument is set. I think you got to separate fighter from human here when you're the greatest of all time. I mean, I think in every GOAT, there's some bad in the GOAT, and I'm not encouraging bad behavior, but what I'm saying is when you look throughout history, Michael Jordan isn't extremely well liked. I'm not the biggest fan of him. When you look at Barry Bonds, for example, was Barry Bonds, the greatest guy in the world, or were any of these, people consider Mike Tyson the greatest boxer of all time, and look at what legal trouble he got into. So I'm not saying that Jones fits into those categories. But what I'm saying is that when you just look at fighter for fighter and skill for skill, I don't think there's anybody better than he was. And I think there are some records that are not going to be broken for a long time. So I'm just going to keep it straight that I think Ariel's wrong here. I have George St. Pierre at number 2. Could you make the argument for number 1? Yeah, but to not even have him in the discussion, I think is a little bit strange just due to stuff that happened outside. But if you really want to go that far and go to that extreme, you can go to that extreme. I just don't think that he's right in this instance. Zane's errors, I had one. I swapped Roundtree for Hill on that one sentence. My apologies. Roundtree is the one who extended Hill's losing streak to 3, and Roundtree is back in the win column after the loss to Pereira. So just wanted to make that clear. And of course, I also wanted to say too that I take these errors very seriously, so I wanted to get that straightened out of the way for now until then, just so we have those cleaned up. But that's going to do it, though, for Bando's Breakdowns. This has been episode 51. Thanks again for tuning in. Again, listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, Bando's Breakdowns is presented by Playback as well. And, again, they've been a great partner to us this entire time for about a little over a year now. More stuff on the way with baseball and the WNBA and so much more. Some extra content also as well. Press Row and a few other shows are up there. So stay tuned for everything that's going on with Playback and so much more. But that's going to do it for episode 51. Thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.